world is watching the Persian Gulf tonight as the shadow of war grows longer than it has been in decades. On Wednesday, January 28, 2026, President Donald Trump issued a declaration that has sent shockwaves from the halls of Washington to the streets of Tehran. The message, delivered through a blunt post on Truth Social, was unmistakable. He spoke of a massive armada, a fleet even larger than the one that recently facilitated the removal of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, now cutting through the water with what he called great power, enthusiasm, and purpose. At the center of this force is the nuclear-powered USS Abraham Lincoln. It isn't just a carrier strike group. To the White House, it is a mobile ultimatum. The president's words were chillingly precise. He stated that this fleet is ready, willing, and able to rapidly fulfill its mission, with speed and violence if necessary. This is no longer just a war of words. Trump is calling it the final countdown for a new nuclear deal. His demand, a total end to Iran's nuclear ambitions. No middle ground, no enrichment, no nuclear weapons. But there is a ghost haunting this escalation. The president reminded the Iranian leadership of June 2025, the night of Operation Midnight Hammer, when U.S. stealth bombers and Tomahawk missiles obliterated the nuclear facilities at Fordo and Natanz. His warning tonight was simple, yet terrifying. The next attack, he said, will be far worse. Don't make that happen again. As the Abraham Lincoln moves closer to the Iranian coast, the question isn't just if Iran will negotiate. It's whether they have any time left to do so. While the USS Abraham Lincoln advances through the Arabian Sea, the response from Tehran has been a cocktail of defiance and desperation. On Thursday, January 29, the Iranian government officially declared a state of war readiness. Vice President Mohammad Reza Arif made the announcement from a fortified meeting in Tehran, stating that the country has moved to a wartime economic plan. His message to the White House was clear: we do not start wars, but we will finish them. But it is Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi who has taken to the global stage to meet Trump's rhetoric head-on. He described Trump's speed and violence threat as reckless, dangerous, and a gross violation of international law. In a direct response to the Armada's movement, Araghchi issued a chilling warning of his own. He stated that Iran's armed forces are standing by with their fingers on the trigger, ready to launch an unprecedented and comprehensive retaliation against any source of aggression. This isn't just about military posturing. This is about a regime fighting for its survival on two fronts. While they face an American fleet on the horizon, they are facing an uprising in their own streets. Since late December, a collapsing currency and skyrocketing poverty have driven thousands of Iranians to protest. The response from the state has been brutal. Reports suggest that as many as 5,000 people have been killed in a massive crackdown, while thousands more have been arrested. To the White House, these protesters are a reason for intervention. Trump has promised them that help is on the way. But to the Ayatollahs, these protesters are terrorists fueled by foreign intelligence. As the sun sets over the Persian Gulf, the tension is thick enough to break. On one side, a president who has already proven he will strike. On the other, a regime that believes it has nothing left to lose. Both sides say they want a deal. Both sides say they want peace. But with an armada closing the distance, the time for talking is being replaced by the sound of fighter jets warming up on the flight deck. While the American armada moves closer to the Iranian coastline, the ripples of this confrontation are already shaking the foundations of the global economy. For the first time since last summer, Brent crude has surged past $70 a barrel, as traders across the globe scramble to price in the risk of a total shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran has made it clear they will not be the only ones to suffer in a war. The Revolutionary Guard has announced live-fire naval drills for the first week of February, a move many see as a rehearsal for closing the world's most critical energy artery. If the strait closes, 20% of the world's oil supply vanishes overnight, and the speed and violence Trump promised could manifest as a global economic earthquake. But the pressure isn't just coming from the sea. It's coming from the air. In Washington, the halls of the Pentagon have become a revolving door for regional power players. This week, high-level defense officials from Israel and Saudi Arabia were spotted entering the White House. Israel, still vigilant after the strikes of 2025, is reportedly sharing a target list with American intelligence, focusing on the remaining fragments of Iran's nuclear and missile infrastructure. Yet even as they coordinate, a shadow of fear hangs over America's regional allies. From Riyadh to Abu Dhabi, the message being sent to Washington is one of extreme caution. Gulf states have reportedly told the Trump administration they will not allow their airspace or bases to be used for a strike on Iran. They know that while the U.S. can pull the trigger and sail away, they are the ones who will have to live with the retaliation. Amidst this chaos, one voice is desperately calling for a ceasefire of words. Turkish President Erdogan has stepped into the fray, offering Ankara as a neutral ground for a last-chance summit. On Friday, January 30, Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi is expected to land in Turkey for urgent talks. The goal, to see if there is a way for Tehran to accept Trump's demands without the humiliation of a total surrender. Turkey has even proposed a direct video call between Trump and the Iranian president, a high-stakes gamble to see if art of the deal diplomacy can succeed where threats of force have failed. The world is now split between two realities. In one, a diplomatic breakthrough in Ankara saves the region from fire. In the other, the Massive Armada fulfills its mission and the final countdown reaches zero. The clock is no longer ticking, it is roaring. To understand the gravity of the terms speed and violence, one must look at the hardware currently converging on the Iranian coast. This is not just a diplomatic escort. It is a saturation of force. The USS Abraham Lincoln is not traveling alone. It is flanked by a lethal vanguard of guided missile destroyers, the USS Frank E. Peterson Jr., the USS Spruance, and the USS Michael Murphy. On the Lincoln's flight deck, the air hums with the presence of F-35C Lightning stealth fighters and EA-18G Growlers, aircraft designed specifically to dismantle sophisticated air defense systems before a single bomb is ever dropped. The Pentagon has reinforced this naval presence by moving THAAD missile defense systems into the region and deploying F-15E Strike Eagles to bases in Jordan and Qatar. The message is clear. If the order is given, the strike will not just be powerful, it will be instantaneous. But while the world stares at the carriers, the White House is staring at the streets of Tehran. For the first time, President Trump has explicitly tied this military movement to what he calls a rescue mission for the Iranian people. Since late December, Iran has been engulfed in a revolution fueled by a currency that has lost half its value in a single year. The images leaking out through VPNs and satellite uplinks are haunting. Despite a near-total internet blackout that began on January 8th, reports from the human rights activists' news agency suggest a death toll that is difficult to fathom. They estimate that over 5,000 people have been killed in less than a month, including 43 children and hundreds of students. In Washington, this bloodshed has changed the math. Trump's rhetoric has shifted from purely nuclear concerns to a broader humanitarian ultimatum. He has publicly warned the regime that if the mass executions and killings of peaceful protesters do not stop, the United States is locked and loaded to intervene. Help is on its way, he posted to the millions of Iranians watching from behind the digital Iron Curtain. This creates a terrifying paradox for the Iranian leadership. To stop the crackdown is to risk losing control of their country to the protesters. But to continue the crackdown is to invite the speed and violence of the American Armada waiting just over the horizon. Even the most seasoned analysts are struggling to predict the next move. Some see a zombie state, a regime that is functionally dead but refuses to fall, clinging to power through sheer brutality. Others see a cornered animal, capable of one final, catastrophic lash-out that could set the entire Middle East ablaze. Trump has made it clear that the time for strategic patience died in 2025 with Operation Midnight Hammer. He is betting everything on the idea that the regime will break before the carrier group reaches its final station. But in the narrow corridors of the Kremlin and the staterooms of Beijing, the world is watching to see if this is the ultimate masterstroke of negotiation, or the opening chapter of a third world war. While the American Armada makes its final transit toward the Gulf of Oman, the geopolitical chessboard is being rearranged in real time. This isn't just a duel between Washington and Tehran. It has become a global flashpoint where the world's superpowers are being forced to pick a side. On Tuesday, January 27, reports surfaced of a massive Chinese airlift. 16 military cargo planes were tracked landing in Iran, reportedly carrying defensive support to bolster the regime's aging infrastructure. Beijing, which has long relied on discounted Iranian energy, is walking a razor's edge. While they publicly call for strategic patience, their actions suggest they are not ready to let their primary Middle Eastern partner collapse under the weight of American steel. In Moscow, the Kremlin's silence was finally broken on January 29. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov warned that the potential for negotiations is not exhausted, but his tone was heavy with a different kind of warning. Russia, currently engaged in its own regional complexities, views a total U.S. victory in Iran as a direct threat to its southern flank. The presence of Russian frigates in the region, including the Marshal Shapashnikov, serves as a silent reminder that any speed and violence unleashed by the Lincoln Strike Group will be watched by Russian eyes from just a few miles away. But why is the clock ticking so loudly now? Why did Trump choose this exact moment to move the fleet? The answer lies in a classified intelligence brief that has begun to leak into the public consciousness. Analysts suggest that despite the devastation of Operation Midnight Hammer in 2025, Iran's scientists have moved their operations even deeper underground. Some experts believe Tehran is now in a breakout phase, a window of just 1 to 2 weeks where they could produce enough weapons-grade uranium for their first nuclear device. To the Trump administration, this is the ultimate red line. The White House believes that if they do not strike now or force a total surrender, the next time they face Iran, it will be a nuclear-armed state. This has created an atmosphere of pure electricity in the region. In Israel, the Air Force has been placed on its highest level of alert since the 1970s. Prime Minister Zamir has held 3 emergency meetings with U.S. General Brad Cooper in just the last 48 hours. They aren't just discussing if a strike happens, they are finalizing the how. Yet, even as the engines of war roar to life, a small, flickering light of diplomacy remains. The Turkish mediation efforts in Ankara are being described as the final exit. Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi is reportedly carrying a message from the supreme leader, a message that could either be a historic concession or a final act of defiance. The world is holding its breath. We are no longer watching a regional dispute. We are watching the potential birth of a new world order or the violent end of an old one. The Armada is on station. The satellites are locked. And the man in the White House has his pen hovering over the order that would change everything. As the USS Abraham Lincoln enters the northern Arabian Sea, the margin for error has vanished. Military historians often speak of the Black Swan, the unforeseen event that drags nations into a conflict they were trying to avoid. In the high-tension waters of the Persian Gulf, that event is no longer a theory. It is a mathematical probability. The red lines have been drawn in disappearing ink. Washington's red line is clear. Any move by Tehran to cross the nuclear breakout threshold will be met with immediate destruction. But Tehran has drawn its own line in the sand. They have warned that even a limited or surgical strike on their soil will be treated as an act of all-out war. Senior advisor Ali Shamkhani recently dismissed the idea of a targeted strike as a Western illusion, promising that any aggression would trigger a response aimed directly at the heart of Tel Aviv and every U.S. base in the region. This creates the ultimate black swan scenario, a miscalculation in the dark, with thousands of Iranian one-way attack drones and a newly replenished arsenal of ballistic missiles standing by. The risk of an accidental launch is at an all-time high. If a rogue commander or a panicked radar operator mistakes a routine U.S. surveillance flight for the start of an invasion, the resulting retaliation would leave President Trump with no choice but to fulfill his promise of speed and violence. But there is a second, more silent trigger: the cyber red line. Intelligence reports suggest that the U.S. has already embedded digital landmines within Iran's power grid and command and control networks. If Iran perceives a major cyber attack as a precursor to a physical strike, they may choose to use it or lose it, launching their missile salvos before their communications are cut. And then there is the human factor. In the streets of Tehran, the death toll from the January crackdown has reportedly soared past 30,000. As the regime's internal security forces face exhaustion and burnout, the possibility of a military defection or a mid-level mutiny grows. If a faction of the Iranian military decides to side with the protesters and seizes a missile silo or a naval vessel, the chain of command shatters. In that moment of chaos, who owns the trigger? The world is not just waiting for a decision from the White House or the supreme leader anymore. We are waiting to see if a single nervous finger, a digital glitch, or a desperate commander decides the fate of millions. The final countdown isn't just about a clock on a wall. It's about a hair-trigger world where the first shot might be fired by mistake. As the clock ticks toward the end of January 2026, we find ourselves at the edge of a cliff that has been decades in the making. On one side of this abyss stands Donald Trump, a leader who has fundamentally rewritten the rules of American diplomacy. He has discarded the slow-moving gears of traditional statecraft in favor of what he calls the Massive Armada, a physical manifestation of the art of the deal, backed by the most lethal strike group on the planet. For Trump, the goal is simple, even if the execution is anything but: force a total, unconditional Iranian surrender on the nuclear front, or unleash a firestorm that would make 2025's Operation Midnight Hammer look like a warning shot. On the other side of this abyss is a regime that has perhaps never been more vulnerable, yet never more dangerous. The Islamic Republic is a wounded titan, bleeding from the inside as it faces an uprising of its own people. A generation that has decided the price of freedom is worth more than the fear of the basage. With death tolls now estimated by some international monitors to be nearing 30,000, the streets of Tehran and Mashhad are no longer just sites of protest. They are sites of martyrdom. The regime knows that if they blink before the American fleet, they lose their standing as a revolutionary power. But if they don't, they risk losing the very soil they stand on to a barrage of Tomahawks and F-35s. This is the unbearable uncertainty that now hangs over the Middle East like a thick, choking fog. Every ship tracking app, every satellite feed, and every social media post is being scrutinized for the spark that will start the blaze. Will it be a black swan event, a stray missile, a panicked commander, or a cyber glitch that plunges the world into a conflict that no one truly wants, but everyone is prepared for? Or will the final exit in Ankara, mediated by Turkey and the Gulf states, provide a narrow bridge back from the brink? We have to ask ourselves, what does speed and violence actually look like in 2026? It looks like a world where oil prices could triple in a week, where the lights of global cities flicker as the energy markets collapse, and where the axis of resistance reaches out from the shadows to strike at targets far beyond the Persian Gulf. It looks like a world where the line between saving a people and destroying a nation becomes dangerously blurred. As of this moment, the USS Abraham Lincoln is on station. The final countdown has begun. President Trump has said that time is truly of the essence, and for the millions of Iranians caught between a brutal crackdown and an approaching armada, those words carry a weight that we can only begin to imagine. History is rarely written in the moments of peace. It is written in the moments of impossible choices. We are watching the ink dry on a new chapter of the human story, a chapter that will be defined by whether the world's leaders choose the path of the deal Or the path of the sword? The Armada is here, the ultimatum is clear, and the world is holding its breath. If you found this breakdown helpful, please subscribe for more real-time geopolitical updates. We will be tracking the Lincoln Strike Group every step of the way. What do you think? Is this a masterclass in negotiation or a recipe for disaster? Let us know in the comments below.